Okay guys, so this time we will now discuss the topic na free falling body. So before that, let's read first the description for this topic, free fall. So what is free fall? So free fall is a common kind of motion which everybody can observe in daily life. So if we drop something accidentally, we can see its motion. In the beginning, it will have low speed. So usually guys, ang mga cases dito is yung you drop a ball, drop a stone. So the initial velocity for that, kapag tandaan nyo, kapag sinabing drop, so it will start at 0 velocity. Pero there are some cases naman na may initial speed yung velocity niya or yung object niya. So it will have low speed and until the end, it gain speed, and before the collision, it reaches its maximum speed. Many factors are there to affect the speed of the object while it is in free fall. So the old equation guys, kung maalala nyo, yung rectilinear translation natin, ito yung mga formulas niyan. So i-edit ko lang na konti, nakita ko lang to sa internet. So tinamad ako mag-type. So this is the final velocity, and then ito initial. Ayan, so ito initial velocity, and then ito final, and then this is the initial. Okay, so nandito rin pala sa baba, inilagay naman. Anyway, so yung magiging new equation natin is ito na. So kamukha lang din naman siya ng mga equation na ginamit natin for rectilinear translation. So nangyari lang na napalitan lang yung ibang values dyan. So ito, final velocity pa rin siya. This one is initial velocity. So ito, gagawin kong plus or minus gt. So mamaya explain ko kung kailan siya nagiging plus and kailan nagiging minus. So sa ibang book, may iba silang technique, pero ituturo kong technique sa inyo yung, I believe ito na yung pinakamadaling intindihan. Okay, so yung h mo, ito, on some books, siya ay yung y mo. But, kayo nang bahala mag-ano dyan, kung anong gusto yung letter. So again, plus minus 1/2 gt squared, and then ito bf squared, so bo squared, and then plus minus 2ah. So yung a, mapapalitan lang to ng g. Ba't nga ba a dito yan? Alright, so ito yung tatlong equation na to. Again, kamukha lang naman yan ng mga equation na ginamit natin sa rectilinear translation. Okay, so sir, kailan ba nagiging plus or minus yung g? So guys, ang tandaan nyo na lang, yung initial velocity kasi ang magdidikta kung kailan positive or negative si g mo. So, kapag ang motion ng isang body na ina-analyze natin is pababa, kapag paganyan yung initial velocity mo, pasaan ba lagi yung direction ng gravitational acceleration? Di ba pababa din or towards the center of the Earth? So, kung pababa yan, ayan. So, dyan magiging positive yung value ng g. Ngayon, kapag ang mga problems naman, yung initial velocity niya is salungat or opposite the direction of your gravitational acceleration. Katulad yan, kung yung mga problems is coming from the ground, hinagis mo yung bato. So, mga ganong cases ba? So, kapag ganun yung case, guys, yung value ng g mo will be negative. Okay? So, ito na lang yung tandaan nyo. So, again, madali namang unawaan yung principle niyan. So, mas mauunawaan nyo to kapag nag-solve tayo ng problem. So, let's start with problem number 1. Okay, so problem number 1. So, basahin ulit natin. So, a stone is dropped from the top of a building with an elevation of 1,000 feet. 2 seconds later, another stone is projected vertically upward from the ground with a velocity of 248 feet per second. So, if the gravitational acceleration is 32, so nagbigay siya ng specific value. Pero ito, kung wala, so 32.2 siya. So, ang gamitin na lang natin, since binigay sa problem, and para mauha natin yung malapit na sagot, so 32 na lang din yung gamitin natin. Okay? But, if hindi given again, yung gagamitin mo value ng g is 32.2. So, when and where will the stone passes each other? So, dalawa yung tanong, dalawa yung hinahanap. So, before we start, again, drawing muna natin yung figure. So, meron ka daw building. Ayan. So, kung wari tuwid yan, building yan. So, maybe this is under sway. Kaya sumasayaw yung building mo. Okay, so on top of the building, ano ba sabi doon sa ano natin? So, a stone is dropped. So, sabihin natin to si stone A. Ayan. So, dito na lang natin siguro isulat sa tabi. So, a stone was dropped on top of the building, which is 1,000 feet height. Yung height ng building mo is 1,000 feet. Or yung lugar kung saan niya pinatak yung iyong stone is somewhere around 1,000 feet. Okay, so 2 seconds later, another stone is projected vertically upward on the ground. So somewhere here siguro, ayan. So there's a second stone kung saan binato siya vertically upward. Okay, so this is your stone B. Ayan. So ang time dito, so di ba parang kamukha to nung problem natin before for rectilinear translation. So in time B dito, since 2 seconds later yun nangyari, so i-denote natin siya as t minus 2. And yung time A, so ilalet natin siya as t. Again, 2 seconds later. So I explained the concept. So dapat mas lamang yung time ni A since nauna siya ng 2 seconds. So kaya natin ginawan t minus 2. So let's say na yung dalawang stone mo is magtatagpo somewhere here. Okay? So yung stone A, ayan. So mapupunta siya dito. So ilagay muna pala natin yung initial velocity. So since yung problem, masabi sa kanya nga, dropped, so it will start at a velocity of 0 meter per second. And once it reaches yung point saan magpapanagpo yung stone A and stone B, so ilat natin to as final velocity ni stone A. So lagyan rin pala natin to ng A. Ayan, initial velocity of stone A. So sa tingin ko nabigay naman sa problem yung velocity ni stone B. So initial velocity of stone B, so that will be 248 feet per second. So somewhere here, magkaaroon siya ng final velocity, so hindi natin alam. Pero we can have an idea na yung final velocity ni point B when it reaches the same level as stone A, so this will be lesser value compared dun sa initial velocity. Kasi ano siya against the gravity, so babagal yan. And yung final velocity ni stone A, since it is dropped and acting along the gravitational acceleration, so magiging yan or mas malaki yung value niya. So which is coming from 0. So when and where will the stone passes each other? So again, I can say that this distance, so tawagin natin siya as yung displacement ni A. So ang ginamit nga pala dito sa problem na to, so gawin na lang natin siyang YA. Pero kung S, wala namang problema yan. And ito, let's say na ito is yung YB mo. But if you're going to consider this, di ba 1,000 feet naman siya. So, YA plus YB is equals to 1,000 feet. Clear? And then, if you're going to solve for YB, so pwede natin sabihin na yan ay 1,000 minus YA. So, isulat lang natin to para at least mabawasan yung mga unknowns. Nirelate natin yung dalawa. YB. Ayan. So, what do you think yung magiging solution natin dito? Okay, so before that, again, yung ginagawa natin lagi, ilatag mo lahat ng mga available equation na pwedeng gamitin. So, final velocity equals to initial velocity plus or minus gt. And then yung y, so that is VOT plus or minus 1/2 of gt squared. And then yung isa, so BF squared is equals to initial squared. So, plus minus 2gy. Okay, so, ano kaya ang gagamitin natin dito? So, sa malamang-lamang, ito naman din kasi madalas yung gamit na formula. So, we will use equation number 2. So, let's start first with stone A. So, saan natin pwede sulat? Sige, dito na lang. So, considering stone A, ayan, medyo naglolo ko na naman yung ano ko, si Boy Pasma. So, isulat natin. So, again, using that formula or equation, so YA is equals to the initial velocity times t. So this will be ta, and then this is initial velocity a, and then plus or minus 1/2 of g ta squared. Okay, so since ito is drop nga, so ang initial velocity niya is 0, so we can disregard this part of the equation. So ya, so since pababa rin yung initial velocity and yung gravitational acceleration is umayon, so magiging 1/2 of 32 of ta squared. Okay, so I will let this as our equation number 1. So the equation number 2, so that will be coming from the stone B. So this time, considering stone B. Okay, so I believe we will use the same equation. Tama? Since yung final velocity is unknown, so dadami lang yung hinahanap. And gamitin natin yung mga available. So YB is equals to the initial velocity of stone B times the time of B, and then plus or minus 1/2 of g tb squared. Okay, again, yung YB is na-relate natin siya with YA. Tama? So that will be 1,000 minus y sub a is equals the initial velocity of stone B, which is given sa problem na 248. And then yung time B natin, so di ba nasabi natin na siya ay equals sa t minus 2. So ito pala guys, dapat ang gawa natin dito, hindi natin consider yung TA. So t na lang siya. Okay? Ayan. So ito naman, naipakita rin naman natin dito na equal siya sa t. Saan ba yan? Ito. Okay? So TB, so that will be t minus 2. And then, since opposite yung direction niya, coming from the initial velocity, so this will be minus, so malungat yung initial velocity sa gravitational acceleration. So 1/2 of 32 times t minus 2 squared. So this will be our equation number 2. Okay, so ano bang pwede natin gawin? Ayan. What we can do is substitute yung YA from equation 1 to equation 2. So, ang gagawin natin para isa na lang yung unknown, itong value ng YA, isasalpak natin dito. Okay? So, parang ano na lang natin is yung time t. So, may mahanap na tayo, which is t. So, 1,000 minus, substitute lang to. So, 1/2 of 32 times t squared. So, is equals, so copy mo lang to. So, 248 t minus 2. So, minus 1/2 of 32 times t minus 2 squared. And, so, siguro mag-shift solve na lang tayo, para mabilis. Pero, kung ayaw mo mag-shift solve, i-simplify mo. Then, gamitan mo ng quadratic equation. So, I hope tanda pa yon. Just in case lang, since board exam naman is walang shift solve. So, ayan, saksak lang natin dito. So, 1,000 minus 32, so divided by 2 times alpha x squared, and then equals, so 248, so wala tayong magagawa, kailangan natin gumamit ito. So, x minus 2, so minus 1/2 of 32 times t minus 2 squared. Ayan. Tapos shift, solve. So, hingi ng value. Maglagay tayo ng positive value. Since alam naman natin na yung time, wala namang negative time na tinatawag. So, lagyan ko siguro ng 5 para malapit na tayo sa Tapos, equals mo lang. Shift. Sumakto na yata. Na-solve na natin. So, gawin kong 8. So, lalabas yan is, ayan. So, yung lumabas na time is 5. So, nakuha natin, Ayan. So, 5 seconds. So, nilagay ko lang is 5 kasi alam ko yung 5 yung lalabas. Pero any positive value, ang kagandahan kasi pag naglalagay ka ng value doon, mas mabilis niya mahanap yung sagot kapag nag-shift solve ka. Kasi kapag nag-start ka ng 0, iisa-isa niyang hanapin yung sagot na positive value. Eh kung malapit yung nilagay mong sagot, mas mabilis mapaprocess ng calculator niya. Okay, so nasagot na natin yung unang tanong. Ang sunod, saan ba daw ba sila magtatagpo? So it's either YA yan or YB. Wala kasing na-specify dito eh. So hindi sinabing coming from the top of the building or coming from the bottom. Pero check natin kung ano ba yung 400 na to. Kung ito ba ay from the top or from the bottom. So para mahanap yung location na yun, siguro, para mas maikli lang din, ang hanapin natin is yung YA niya. O yung distance coming from the top of the building. So to solve for YA, substitute na lang yung nakuha nating time. So 1/2 of 32 and then t squared. So that will be 5 squared. So using the calculator, so 5 squared times 32 and then divided by 2. Ayan. So yun, 400. Nakuha natin yung location niya. So just to make this complete, so coming from top of the building. So ngayon, kung galing naman doon sa bottom, doon sa pinaka-ground floor niya, so yung YB yung hahanapin. So to solve for YB, so that is 1,000 lang, minus YA. So bakit ba YB yung sinulat ko dito? Ayan. So YB will be just equals to 1,000 minus 400, or YB is equals to 600 feet. So this is considered also correct, ha? So coming from bottom lang. So coming from bottom of the building. Ayan. So kung ganyan yung sagot nyo, acceptable naman yan. So check. Alright, so guys, please copy again the problem. I'll give you 2 minutes to copy, and then before we proceed with the next problem. Okay, so problem number 2. So basahin natin. Suppose that you throw a ball straight up at 10 meter per second and release it at 2 meters above the ground. So for letter A, what maximum height above the ground does the ball reach? Letter B, how long after you release it does the ball hits the ground? So what is the magnitude of its velocity just before it hits the ground? So meron tayong tatlong tanong na hinahanap dito. So before we solve again, let's draw first the figure. So meron daw siguro isang lalaki. Ayan, pagpasensya na yung drawing ko, talagang hanggang dyan lang yung kaya. So yung release point niya is 2 meters above the ground. So gawin natin sigurong nakataas yung kamay. Kasi nung hinagis na niya, diba? Ayan. So yan yung ball. Hindi ako natatawa sa pinaggagawa ko dito. 2 meters. And then sabi dyan, yung velocity ng pagkaahagis niya. So yung initial velocity is 10 meter per seconds. Okay, so what is the maximum height? So muna natin. Drawing natin. Kung wari hanggang dito yung naabot niya. Pero ang gagawin kong magmumukha siyang projectile motion for the sake of the drawing lang. Papatak daw ulit siya dito sa ground. Ayan. So there are several points na kailangan nating maano dito. So ito, ano nga yung sabi? How long after, what is the maximum height above the ground does the ball reaches? So pinapahanap is ito, So hagibin ko na lang hanggang dito. So palitan natin ng kulay. So ayan. So let's say that this is H. Ayan. So unahin muna natin yung letter A. So for letter A, again, ilatag mo ulit yung mga available equation mo. VF, or the final velocity, is equals to initial, then plus minus GT. And then yung height niya, so ito H na lang natin. So VOT plus or minus 1/2 of GT squared. And then the final velocity squared is equals to initial squared plus minus 2GH. Ayan. Okay, so ano ba yung mga key point dito? Guys, kung na-observe nyo, kapag na-reach nung isang bagay yung maximum height niya, kapag hinagis mo coming from a certain height, ano ba yung nagiging velocity natin dito? Ano yung magiging final velocity mo? So ito isang napakalagang analysis kapag sa ganyang mga freefall or vertical translation na problem. So di ba yung final velocity niya, once it reaches its maximum height, so magiging velocity niya at that point is 0 meter per second. Again, this is a really important na observation dito sa mga freefall na problem. Okay, so napakalaga nito kasi hindi nga natin alam yung final velocity. Pero kung i-observe mo, di ba, momentarily, parang tumitigil siya dun sa sa pinakataas. Then before pa ulit siya mag-gain ng speed, bababa, once it reaches its maximum height. Okay, so to solve for H, so wala rin tayong time. So final velocity. Okay, so makukuha naman natin siya using the first and second equation. So let's start first with the first equation. So the final velocity is equals to initial velocity and then plus or minus GT. So the final velocity, so that will be 0. Initial is 10 meter per second. So again, it is opposite the direction of the initial velocity, kaya ito is magiging minus. So this is an SI, so 9.81 times T. So this will be your equation number 1. So simplify na pala muna natin. Or wag. Sige, simplify natin. Pindot na ba? Ayan. So isolve natin siya in terms of time. So that is 10 over 9.81. May makukuha na pala tayong value. Sorry. O sige, yan na lang muna. Para buo. seconds. Yan na lang isaksak natin doon. And then after solving for the time, we can now solve its maximum height. So for letter A, capital letter A, so h is equals to initial velocity times time, then plus or minus 1/2 of gt squared. So h, so initial velocity of 10, and then yung kanyang time, so that is 10 over 9.81. And then, so minus, kasi opposite nga, 1/2 of 9.81 times 10 over 9.81 squared. So, mahanap natin yung maximum height niya. So, pindutin lang natin sa calculator. So, 10, so times 10, so squared ko na lang. So, divided by 9.81. And then minus 1/2 or 2 inverse times 9.81. Dapat pala kinansel ko na. So, times 10 squared divided by 9.81 squared. Okay lang yan. So, that is 5.09. 5.09, dalawa pa, 68. Pero hindi pa yan yung ano kasi ang tinatanong what is the maximum height above the ground? So, isasama mo yung 2 meters. Okay? So, that is 2 plus h, or that is simply equals to 7.0968 meter. So, napansin nyo, ayan. So, ito is na-ground off lang sa first decimal. So, ito na yung for letter A. Next, for letter B naman. So, how long after you release it does the ball hits the ground? Okay. So, ang mangyayari, we will analyze that for letter B. So, di ba ito yung tao? So, mangyayari ngayon, coming from this point, tapos papunta dito, hanggang maarating ulit siya doon sa ground level. Ayan. So, anahin ko lang ng color green. Oh, sorry. Ayan. So, ito, again, alam natin na coming from the top, the initial velocity of that. So, ito, magiging initial na kasi parang binaak natin siya. Ito yung sunod na scenario. So, ang gagawin natin, may nakuha na tayong time kanina. Ito, 10 over 9.81. So, mangyayari, i-add lang natin siya dun sa time na makukuha natin. So, coming from the top hanggang ma-reach na yung ground nung, ground surface. Okay? So, ito. So, let's just say before niya ma-hit yung ground. So, ito yung magiging final velocity niya, which is still unknown. So, ito ay 0 meter per second. And we all know na itong height na to is yung nakuha natin from letter A. So, that is 7.0968 meter. Okay, so how can we solve for that time? So, hindi kasi natin alam yung final velocity. So, we will use the second equation. So, that will be h, or h is equals to VOT plus 1/2 of GT squared. Okay? So, knowing that h is equals to 7.0968, so equals to, so ito guys is ano na so sige, para hindi malito, ilalat ko na lang tong y. Kasi may h na kanina nagamit na natin. So, baka malito lang kayo. So, gawin natin tong y. And then yung equation, gawin lang din natin tong y. Ayan. So, initial velocity, so I can cancel out this one since it will start at a 0 velocity. So, since pababa yan, so this is magiging positive rin, 1/2 of 9.81 times, sabihin natin to as T1. Okay? And then ito, gawin natin T2. Yung the time required coming from the top hanggang ma-reach na yung ground surface. Okay? So, that is unknown. Ito nga yung hinahanap. So, T2. And then, T sub 2 squared. Ayan. So, may makukuha tayong time. And then once we get that time, i-add lang natin siya dun sa T1 or inakuha natin kanina. Nasan ko lang to. So 7.0968. So times 2. Nag-algebraic manipulation lang ako. Divided by 9.81 equals, and then square root of that answer. So that is 1.2029. 1.2029. Nagloloko talaga siya pagbasa eh. Seconds. Okay. So to get the total time from the release point hanggang sa ma-reach na ulit yung ground. So the total time, so ano lang natin total time na travel ng stone is T1 plus T2. So i-add lang natin yung T1 which is so plus 10 divided by 9.81. Ayan, so 2.22 seconds. 2222. So sakto. 2.2222 seconds. So nakuha natin yung pinapahanap for letter B. So last question, what is the magnitude of its velocity just before it hits the ground? So before niya ma-hit yung ground, so ito nga yung BF na pinapahanap. So hanapin natin yan. Ano? So how can we solve for that one? So simply by using the first equation or the second equation. So maalin dyan, dapat pareho lang ilalabas sa sagot. Pero since ito mas madali, compared dito na mag-squared pa. So yung unang equation na lang yung gamitin natin. So final velocity, nag-ano talaga? Bumabagal. Is equals to initial, which is 0. So plus 9.81. Yun na. Okay, so nagloko na naman. So 9.81 then multiply by 1.2029 ha. So itong scenario natin yung gagamitin. Hindi ito yung gagamitin natin ha. So times 1.2029. So the final velocity right before it reaches the ground surface 9.81 lang. So 9.81 and then multiply by 1.2029. So 11.8 meter per second. Ayan. So ano ba yan? 004. 004 meter per second. Ayan. So nasagutan natin yung tatlo. Again guys, please copy the problem. So I'll give you again 2 minutes. Okay, so problem number 3, basahin natin. So a stone was dropped from a balloon which is ascending at a rate of 6 meter per second. So when the balloon was 70 meters above the ground, which of the following gives the velocity of the stone after 3 seconds? For letter B, which of the following gives the time required for the stone to attain a downward velocity of 15 meter per second? How far the stone was from the ground after 4 seconds? And for D, how long did it take the stone to hit the ground? So medyo maraming tanong dito. Pero bago ang lahat, again, i-drawing muna ulit natin yung figure. So meron daw ditong balloon. So siguro ito yung hot air balloon. Ayan. So, nang nangyayari dyan, so this hot air balloon is 70 meters above the ground. So, ang kanyang, it is ascending at a rate of 6 meter per second. So, yung velocity ng balloon mo is 6 meter per second. So, nangyari daw, at this point, siguro dito na lang, nakayuko yung tao. Diyan niya inano yung bato. So, nag-drop daw siya ng balloon. Okay? Pero guys, this time, since yung balloon mo is gumagalaw din pataas, so nang drop mo yung stone, so it is also traveling, or its velocity is also upward with a velocity of 6 meter per second. Okay? So, for letter A, ano ba hinahanap? Which of the following gives the velocity of the stone after 3 seconds? Okay, so nung ina-analyze ko yung problem, so yung 6 meter per second kasi is medyo mabagal na. Ano? So, ang idea ko dito, yung velocity na makukuha natin is downward velocity. O pababa na yung stone. Since 6 meter lang yan, so i-analyze rin natin if tama ba yung assume ko. So, gawan lang natin ito ng ano. So, yung stone mo nga. So, most probably ganyan. Pagmumukain ko lang siyang projectile for the sake of analysis. Ayan. So, i-check muna natin at this point. Ano? Do sa maximum height na ma-attain niya. Okay, so yung final velocity do sa maximum height, so that is 0 meter per second. So, i-determine ko lang yung time required para ma-reach siya yung maximum height. Okay, so i-check ko lang if pasok siya do sa 3 seconds. Kasi ang duda ko yung 3 seconds is somewhere here na. So, pababa na siya. Okay? So, to solve that, again, latag mo ulit yung mga available equation mo. So, final velocity, initial, plus or minus gt. And then, yung isa, yung h is equals to BOT plus or minus 1/2 of GT squared. And yung last, so final velocity squared is equals to initial velocity squared plus or minus 2GH. Okay? So, check natin. What will be the time required to reach its maximum height? So, to solve for that, we will use this first equation. So, final velocity is equals to initial plus or minus gt. Knowing that yung iyong final velocity will be 0 and yung initial velocity mo is 6 meter per second. Since pataas yan, so it is opposite the gravitational acceleration. That's why it is minus 9.81 times the time. So what is the time required to reach its maximum height? So that will be 6 divided by 9.81. Okay, so tama yung ano natin, analysis. So 0.611 6 seconds. So okay lang to, ano? So ang gagawin ko, i-apply ko pa rin yung same equation, but this time, yung time na gagamitin natin is yung 3 seconds na. So mangyayari lang dito guys, the negative sign will tell you if pasaan na yung direction ng iyong velocity. So ano ba yung ibig ko sabihin dito? So for letter A, so yung final velocity mo, so ito yung hinahanap, di ba? So initial velocity of 6 And then minus, since opposite nga siya, so 9.81 times 3 seconds. Okay? So what will be the final velocity? So 6 minus 9.81 times 3. Okay, so that is negative 23.43 meter per seconds. Okay? So therefore, this final velocity is 23.43 meter per second. Downward na siya. Okay? So, pwede mo rin guys gawin, kung gusto mong positive yung sagot na yan, ang pwede mong gawin, so coming from this point, and na-determine natin yung time na yan, so ang gawin mo, another scenario, ito yung gawin mong initial velocity, and then humanap ka ng panibagong final velocity. Na mangyayari, yung time na i-consume mo is isusubtract mo na to. Or ganito yung sinasabi ko. So, pakita ko lang dito na mabilis. So, ito nga yung initial point niya. Ngayon, pababa na siya. Okay, so hanapin natin yung velocity niya dito. So, initial velocity here is 0 meter per second. And then yung time dito, so this is equals na sa 3 minus 0.6116. Okay? So, para lang makuha natin yung positive sagot din. So, gawin natin to alternative solution. Ayan. So, the final velocity will be equals sa 0 kasi yung initial velocity niya, eto na, 0. And then, since sabay na yung direction niya with the gravitational acceleration, so plus na siya, 9.81. Ngayon, ang time na mangyayari dyan is 3 minus 0.6116. So, ayun din yung makukuha natin sagot. So, check natin. So, 9.81 times 3 minus 0.6116. Ayan. So, 23.43 meter per second. So, downward. Okay? So, either of these two solution is acceptable. So, for letter B, ano bang hinahanap sa B? Which of the following gives the time required for the stone to attain a downward velocity of 15 meter per second? So, ngayon, ang tinatanong naman dito is yung time. Kung kailan niya ma-achieve yung 15 meter per second na downward velocity. So, pwede natin gawin, ano ba? So, pwedeng yung case A din natin, pero alam natin nga na negative yung magiging 15 meter per second kasi sasalungat na siya sa direction ng So, gawin lang natin dito. Yung for letter A, assume natin na nandito siya. Ayan. So, yung final velocity niya is 23.43. So, ibig sabihin, yung for letter B, so gawin ko na lang siyang kulay pula. So, sabihin natin nandito siya banda. Kung saan yung downward velocity niya is 15 meter per second. Okay, so by applying this formula, again, ang magro-rule nga ng direction dito is yung iyong initial velocity. Ngayon, any direction na salungat dyan, that will be considered negative. So, if you're going to use the first equation, yung BF nga, yung final velocity is equals to the initial velocity or plus minus GT. So, ang final velocity, since downward yan, so this will be negative 15. Yung initial velocity mo is 6, and then minus 9.81 times yung time t. So, to solve for t, to reach the 15 meter per second na velocity, so that will be equals lang sa 6, so transpose ko lang, so plus 15 divided by 9.81. So, to solve the time required to get a 15 meter per second downward velocity, so 6 plus 15 and then divided by 9.81. Ayan. So, 2.1407. So, 2.1407 seconds. So, pwede mo rin i-apply yung etong principle nito. Sige, pakita na rin natin para busog na busog kayo. So, ang mangyayari lang, again, gawin ko lang tong pula. So, ito yung final velocity niya kung saan siya ay 15 meter per second. Okay, so yung alternative solution using this diagram. So, final velocity mo, since yung downward velocity niya, yung initial velocity is downward, so positive na yan, kasi ito'y pababa na rin naman. So, that is, diretso ko na, 15 is equals to the initial velocity of 0. So, plus 9.81 times t. Okay? So, yung t mo dito is 15 over 9.81. Pero meron tayong na-consume na time, which is 0.6116 noong marating niya yung highest point. So, ang mangyayari lang, to solve for the time required to reach its 15 meter per second velocity. So, i-add natin yung 0.6116 kasi ito nga yung time coming from the balloon hanggang ma-reach niya yung maximum height. So, that will be 0.6116 and then plus yung time t, which is 15 over 9.81. So, the time required to reach 15 meter per second velocity. So, that is 0.6116 and then plus 15 divided by 9.81. Ayan. So, we still arrive at the same answer. So, dapat lang naman. Ano? So, guys, ito yung sinasabi ko sa inyo. Marami kayong pwedeng gawing diskarte dito. So, nasa sa inyo kung paano nyo siya gustong isolve. Kung gusto nyo medyo biak-biak na ganyan, so you can resolve using this solution. Pero, as long as napapanghawaan mo yung principle na yung initial velocity yung nagdidikta ng direction, you can take the shortcut. Ano? So, nasa sa inyo kung ano yung gusto nyong gawin solution. And then next, for letter C. Okay, so C is how far the stone was from the ground after 4 seconds. So, gawin na lang natin yung shortcut. Ano? For letter C. So, ang gagamitin natin equation dyan, so since given yung time and yung initial velocity is also given, so we can use this equation, yung second equation natin, which is H is equals to VOT plus or minus 1/2 of GT squared. So, mangyayari, ang mahanap nating distance niyan, ano ba yung ano niya? After 4 seconds, di ba? So, after 3 seconds, nandito siya banda. So, 4 seconds, so let's just say na nandito na siya. Ito na lang green. So, after 4 seconds, ito. So, siguro hindi lang ganun ka-accurate yung magiging figure natin. Pero, okay lang yan. H. So, ang sinasabi dito, from the ground. Ano? So, kailangan nating mahanap is ito. Okay? So, ima-minus lang natin siya sa 70. Ayan. So, ilat na lang natin siguro to as Y. Okay? So, let's solve for H. So, again, yung H mo, kung mapapansin nyo, nasa baba siya ng VO or pababa yung sukat niya. Ano? So, therefore, ito is magiging negative. Okay? Anyway, yung sagot niya naman ipapakita naman niya kung positive or negative siya. So, initial velocity of 6 multiplied by 3, ano ba? 4 seconds. And then minus 1/2 of 9.81 times 4 squared. So, what will be the value of H? So, pindutin lang nga sa ALQ. So, 6 times 4 and then minus 2 inverse of 9.81 times 4 squared. So, that is 54.48. So, ba't lumabas yung sagot? How far the stone was from the ground after 4 seconds? So, I think yung tamang sagot dito is, ito yung distance niya away from dun sa balloon eh. So, yung Y, so that is 70 minus 54.48 meters. So, 70 minus answer. Sorry, kasi negative naging add. So, 70 minus 54.48. So, that is 15.52 coming from the ground surface. Okay, so nagkamali lang siguro dito ng answer key. Ang tama dapat dyan, ito. If coming from the ground. Pero kung coming from the balloon, so ito, 54.48. Okay, last is for letter D. So ano bang hinahanap sa letter D? How long did it take the stone to hit the ground? So coming from dito, tumaas hanggang sa bumaba, gaano daw yung katagal? So for letter D, I think same equation din naman yung gagamitin natin. So H is equals to VOT plus or minus 1/2 of GT squared. So ang gagamitin natin distance niya is itong 70 meters. Pero since siya nga is opposite the direction of your velocity, so that will be negative 70. So initial velocity is 6, and then yung time nga required, so multiply mo lang to ng t. And then pataas, so minus ulit ito, 1/2 of 9.81 times t squared. Ayan, so shift solve na lang natin. Ano ba yung lalabas sa sagot dyan? So, negative 70 yan. So, negative 70 is equals to 6. Ulit ko siyang x. And then, minus 1/2 of 9.81 x squared. So, shift solve. Lagyan natin ang positive value. Ayan. So, 4.44. Ayan. So, 4.43. Dalawa pa. 85 seconds. Okay, guys. So, again, mahalaga dito, guys, kung alin yung negative sign or alin yung positive. Again, naka-base ka dito sa direction ng iyong initial velocity. Okay, guys. So, I'll give you again 2 minutes to copy this problem, the solution to this problem. So, you may start. Okay, guys, so that ends our discussion for rectilinear translation at sa freefall. So again, dun sa end ng inyong module, ito ang mga problems na to nandun. Kaso wala siya ng solution. Yung mga answer key lang ang meron. So yung activity na gagawin nyo, dun sa end ng module nyo, may mga practice problem na sasagutan. So paisagutan na lang, and then ipapasa nyo ulit siya. So maybe I'll give you around 1 to 2 weeks para ipasa yun. Okay, so that ends our discussion for this topic. So let's proceed with the next module.